I'd like to now take a moment to introduce our next speaker, Nick Sonnenberg. I've known him for years, and he's a great friend as well as a great entrepreneur. Uh, he has made a business that has been 100% virtual from day one, and he has lots of lessons for us from that experience. Nick, welcome aboard, and let's hear from you.
All right, can you hear me all right?
Indeed, yes.
All right, great. How's it going, guys? I have prepared some slides, and feel free, if you have any questions, post it in the chat below, and Jeff can interrupt me, and I'm happy on the fly to be answering questions. I want this to be as helpful as possible for you guys, because I know that we're all going through quite some changes, and whether it's your first time running remotely, or even if you were already running remotely, there's always better ways and things that you can always do better using technology, new technologies in new ways. So with that, I'll share my screen and go through some slides that I'd put together for you guys, and feel free to stop with any questions. All right, so the title of this talk is called How to Make Remote Work Actually Work, because anyone can be remote, but it's another thing to actually make it work, have the culture still be strong, be efficient. It's kind of like anyone can work out, but only a small percentage of people can be Olympic athletes. So a little bit about me, and then I'll get into the meat of this. But I'm the CEO of Leverage. I'm also the author of Idea to Execution, which is the story of how we bootstrapped Leverage very quickly. I'm a contributor for Inc. on Future of Work and how to run companies efficiently. I have a new book coming out called Come Up for Air, How Your Team Can Leverage Systems and Tools to Stop Drowning in Work. And I also have a business efficiency consulting company, as well as a mastermind group called Bullseye. So this is really my passion, is all about future of work, remote work. I've been talking about this for years, but now there's no choice. You have to really be taking this stuff seriously. Leverage is a on-demand growth agency, which in the first year, we were able to grow it fully remote. We've never had an office before. We grew it to 7 figures and over 100 people the first year by leveraging systems and tools in smart ways. We never raised money. And it was just because we were using technologies in ways that maybe they hadn't been thought to be used before. We automated a lot of things that could be automated. And we've been iterating for years. This stuff isn't super, you can get set up quite quickly with remote, but to get a really robust operational platform takes time. It takes experimenting with how some of these tools will fit into your unique culture. And throughout the years of running Leverage, as well as doing business efficiency consulting, and I've consulted 2-person gas and water leak detection companies, coaches, vet hospitals, up to Hoopery and Tony Robbins and Ethereum and 1,000+ person companies. And everyone, including myself, we had similar problems. And I realized that actually what I built in terms of an operating framework with how I ran Leverage was helpful and worked with other companies, no matter what size or what industry. And I break it down into 3 components that every company needs. And those 3 components I call CPR: communicate, plan, and resource. Those are the 3 categories of tools that every company needs, no matter what. And it's just further highlighted when you are remote how necessary these categories are. Ultimately, the whole purpose of using tools and using any type of technology is so that you can be more efficient. And at a high level, what we're trying to achieve with all this is that I feel a company can only grow or scale as fast as knowledge can be transferred. So what that means is there's a lot of waste in companies where information's lost. It takes 10 times longer to find something. You forget who told you what, or did that information live in a group chat with Jeff, or was that in an email, or was that in Slack? So if you can create a framework so that information is as quick as you have a setup so that it's as quick as possible to find information, That's the ultimate goal and purpose. So whenever I'm looking at new ways of doing things, I'm running it through this lens of, is that going to make it faster for me to find information? So I like to show people this little quiz that I created, and we're not going to go through it. At the end, I'll give you a link to see the answers if you're curious. But I put out a list of just some common day to day things that happen in normal companies, right? You have an update to share about a project. You need to tell someone an idea that you have. A client expressed interest. There's all these different scenarios, but we never stop to say, hey, for this type of scenario, we should use this tool. For this type of scenario, we should use that tool. And so by not having a consistent framework with your team, a scavenger hunt's created, and one person might think that they should be storing something or communicating in tool A, but someone else might be using tool B. And then you start having to look in multiple places, right? So don't worry about this. I'll give you the answer key at the end. But I just wanted to show you like this obvious common 17 different types of situations. There isn't a framework. And that's why I'm writing the book, Come Up for Air. It's based off of my operational efficiency framework to give people consistency within their teams and organizations to maximize their productivity. This stuff is important, especially as your team size grows. So I'm just going to show you some quick demonstrations here. But if you're a 3-person company, there's only 3 ways for your team to connect. When you're 4 people, there's 6 ways to connect. 5 is 10. And you can get the point. It scales exponentially with team size. So already at 14 people, there's 91 different ways to connect. So if you're remote and you have a team of 20 or 30 or 100, there's more and more opportunity for information to get scattered and lost. And it's just more and more important that as early on as possible, you put this foundation into place, right? Because we've all been there before. I call it the scavenger hunt, where you have to start searching for information, right? And it's not a good use of people's time. It impacts culture. It reduces productivity, et cetera, et cetera. So before getting into the meat of CPR, I just want to point out that automation is available, and automation is always better than having humans do things. They never complain. They never get sick, ask for a raise. There's tools out there like Zapier, which are very cheap solutions that help you automate various processes. And it's basically trigger and action based. So this one trigger happens in this one tool. So we use Stripe for a payment processor. Someone signs up. Stripe is the trigger. The action could be notify you in Slack, update a Google spreadsheet, add them to the database, send an email to the person. You could have 100 actions just triggered from that one trigger. And that's really part of the secret sauce why we were able to grow leverage so quickly without raising money. A big part of that was because we automated thousands and thousands of processes. And there's a million integrations you can take a look at. We are automatically posting things from Stripe to QuickBooks to Slack. So if you're interested in that, you can contact me. We could go over that a bit more. So let's get into CPR quickly. So the first part of CPR is communicate. And that's the most important. I look at communication like the oxygen in a company. If you can't have a clear line of communication with your team, everything gets slowed down and the company can quite literally die. And that it's no surprise that in war, a big strategy is to try to cut off your enemy's line of communication. So if you don't take anything else away from this presentation, getting your remote communication dialed in is absolutely critical. I have a few suggestions for communication. And again, I'm going very quickly. Usually when I work with people, it's either in a group 1 or 2 day session. So we're not going to get into all the details of how to do this, but at least if you build awareness around the concepts here, you'll at least be on the right track. So with communication, I recommend text for personal, email for external. There's Slack, there's Microsoft Teams. It doesn't matter which one you want to use, but I recommend one of those for internal communication. So if you just follow that and nothing else in my talk, what this does for you is at least you're reducing the scavenger hunt in terms of, hey, my team, what did Jeff say? Well, Jeff is on my team. That should most likely be in Slack. So I'll just look in Slack versus also having to look in text and email because you don't have any framework in place. So that's the first recommendation. With email, which is a tool that we've all been using for many, many years, but no one really uses it, right? I like to think of email as just a to-do list that other people can add to. So every day I get to inbox zero. And there's a big difference between inbox zero and unread zero. Most clients of mine that I would privately consult, they might start off by thinking that they're good at email, but that's because they have nothing marked as unread, but they have 100,000 emails in their inbox. That's not the right way of managing email. And there's huge benefits to really getting to zero in terms of maximizing your productivity, reducing cognitive overload. The acronym I like to teach when I'm teaching how to get to inbox zero is RAD. You, with any email, you either reply to it, archive it, or defer it. Deferring means you can literally now snooze emails, which most people don't know about. So in Gmail, there's that little clock icon, and you can snooze it. In Outlook, they also now have snoozing. There's also with Outlook extensions like Boomerang that you can install. But the use case of snoozing is really, really critical to your productivity. There's lots of things that you don't want to deal with right now, but it's more relevant next Tuesday. So that doesn't need to clutter your inbox from now until Tuesday. Snooze it, and you know that it's going to come back to the top of your inbox Tuesday morning. And then also, if someone updates, if you get a reply to that email thread, it'll kick it out of snooze before Tuesday if you get a reply before Tuesday. So that's just one really powerful piece of functionality with emails that a lot of people don't know about. There's a bit more to it than this, but if just out of this you get the snoozing, that's going to get you pretty far. Now, the best way to get to inbox zero is to get to email zero. So if you could get things that were happening in email and get them out of email, so for example, anything with team communication, if you get that out of email into a more appropriate tool like Slack, that's going to cut down by a huge amount than the amount of email that you get. And then you have all of the benefits of the great functionality that Slack has. So Slack, as opposed to email, has third-party, well, email now does technically have some third-party integrations, but Slack has way more deep integrations. And they have this concept called channels, which you don't get with text and email, which really can be a game changer when it comes to communicating with your team. So some of the pitfalls, though, that people fall into, so if you're listening to this right now and you've used Slack and you don't really see the value, most likely it's because it's not set up right. Sorry to say. So the things to consider are when you're creating channels, private versus public. I recommend by default making them private because a lot of people don't know what's good for them and they start getting distracted going into channels and that they don't need to be a part of. Channels, by the way, are just topics. So you could have a channel for payroll, and anyone that's involved with payroll could be in that channel. Now, if you're discussing payroll, you discuss it in the payroll channel versus having email threads and text messages with the head of finance about a whole bunch of other things. And if you have to go and find reference to something, some discussion about payroll, you're back in the scavenger hunt. So creating channels, which are just topics of conversation, are huge ways to increase your productivity and remove the scavenger hunt. Other pitfalls that I find are people don't have the right notification preferences, sidebar views, or strategic naming conventions of those channels. So what you want to avoid is having channels like Facebook or marketing Facebook, and then another channel, Facebook marketing. And then before you know it, it's like, which channel should I be talking to about my Facebook ads? So you want to make sure that there's strict naming conventions so it's hyper clear. And then you want to also be conscious of the character limits. So create naming conventions so that it scales and you don't have to redo it. A great way to start is just take your org chart marketing, sales, operations, finance, and start with the main topics in each of those departments. Like I mentioned before, there's third-party integrations with Slack. These are just a handful that we've played around with, but there's literally thousands, and these can really power up how you use Slack. So here are two that I think, it sounds silly, the Giphy one, but it's really important, especially if you weren't remote before and now this is the first time going remote. You really want to be conscious of your team's culture. And a great way to maintain culture in a remote environment is using things like this Giphy. So instead of telling someone good job, you could do /Giphy good job and get a funny Giphy that pops up in Slack. And this sounds silly, but it really adds to the culture and the environment. There's other bots and plugins too that you can integrate with Slack. Another one that we use is Donut. What this one does is it randomly matches two people on the team every week at random. So it gives people the opportunity to meet other teammates. So other best practices that I've found, you want to have an announcement channel. We have like a water cooler channel for the whole team. We also pretty much as much as possible lean towards channels more so than individual messages. For video conferencing, we use Zoom. People can use Hangouts, whatever it is. You're going to definitely need to be using one of them. And some best practices. Snap Camera actually just came out, so you could see that's a picture of me yesterday as Mr. Potato. These are just little cute, fun ways to make the environment a little bit nicer. We have some best practices that we follow at Leverage is have your video on. It's hard enough to be remote, so you still want to have that face-to-face communication. A lot of people don't know that you can utilize breakout rooms. So you could be on a design thinking call with your team and split off and have people join breakout rooms to solve problems. And then you bring people back into the main room after 20 minutes or whatever it is. That's a great way to do design thinking sprints with your team. And I use Zoom quite often just by myself. If there's an announcement I want to make to my team, or there's like a bug that I want to share with the developer, I'll spin up Zoom, I'll record a message, and then I'll paste that message. It could be sharing my screen or not, and then I'll paste that in the appropriate Slack channel as a way to give someone information. So I'm as much as possible, I'm trying to show my face and I'm trying to have my team show their face, and that helps to build culture, as well as it's sometimes more efficient to record a 5-minute video than it is to type out a whole essay. So there's multiple benefits to using that as a strategy. We also use Zapier to connect Slack and Zoom. So that's one of the main integrations that we use. So you might be a normal use case of this would be you're chatting with someone in Slack and it's like, hey, why don't we just jump on a Zoom call? You can do /Zoom and then you both are immediately in a Zoom channel. So that's the quick version of communication. Again, if you would like to go deeper on this, I have some resources for you. But let's get into the P of CPR, which is planning. The way that I like to explain planning to people is, imagine you were going to take your team camping in the forest. You guys would need walkie-talkies to communicate, but that's different than a map. You need a map to navigate out of the forest. So we just talked about communication. Those are your walkie-talkies. Now we're going to talk about the map. And there's part of planning involves project management software. That's one of the core tools I think every company needs. Here are a handful of common ones. It doesn't really matter which one you pick. We use Asana at Leverage, but it really matters to know when to use it and how to use it, right? And a lot of people misuse communication tools as project management tools. I've been there myself where you'll send someone a text or a Slack message or an email. Hey, could you get this done for me by Friday? Now, we all slip and do that, but the most appropriate place for those types of things to live is in project management software, because it's built for that. You can assign people, you can put due dates, put descriptions. it's a way to capture the state of something and be able to prioritize what are the priorities as an individual, as well as from a manager standpoint, a way to prioritize what's the most important thing for the business right now. So to deep dive into Asana, and again, like it's very similar. Asana has the concept of teams. Teams are purely just collections of projects. So you could see on that previous slide, we had a handful of teams. This is what a project would look like. So within projects, you can do various things. You can update the status of a project. You can assign owners, due dates, milestones to a project. If you're used to Kanban workflows and you like Trello, Asana allows you the ability to view things in a board view as well as a list view, which is nice. They have milestones, which are basically just a collections of tasks within that milestone. Milestones live within projects. And then on a task level, you can have a task belong to multiple projects. You can put descriptions, metadata tags, right? So you could create a field called refinement, priority, level of effort, whatever it is, you can create those and customize it. And then you can add at the bottom collaborators where they can contribute and update things. But what I like about Asana is I believe that if more than one person owns something, that no one owns it. And as you can see at the top, there's only one assignee on a task, as opposed to other project management softwares. It allows you to have multiple people assigned to a task. So I like this concept of one owner, but multiple collaborators. And the collaborators can write comments at the bottom, and you guys can chat about the task in the task itself. The description view, you can write robust descriptions and put links and sections in there. And on individual task levels, this is what a project looks like, and each row is a task. And you could see on the right, we've assigned metadata custom fields to each of those tasks to help us understand and filter to whatever view we want. So again, I'm going super, super fast on project management. There's way more to it than this, but I'm just trying to give you the high level. Some best practices. What I like about Asana in particular is they have an inbox. So we do mentions to people in comments so that the comment shows up in your inbox. And just like I suggest getting to Slack 0 or email inbox 0 every day, Asana is another tool that we all get to inbox 0 every day. I think a best practice also is to assign due dates to tasks. And then you have a My Tasks button on the top left where you can categorize across all projects and tasks that you belong to. That's one place where you can prioritize what you need to do today. And it's really a powerful tool. And that's my to-do list. And other people are adding things, but then I categorize what's going to be done today, what's upcoming, what's later. And what's cool is if you put a due date on it, it can automatically move from upcoming to today if it has a due date within 48 hours. Part of planning too, aside from project management, is having team meetings and agendas. Agendas are critical. We have a policy at Leverage, if there's no agenda, there's no meeting. And especially now when we're moving remote and it might be uncomfortable or the first time that you've tried running remote, I suggest over communicating rather than under communicating. It's really people over process in these types of environments. And so I would lean on the side of having more meetings than less. And every meeting should have agendas and have a structure to it. So there's a whole bunch of different types of meetings you might want to consider. If your company is really massively going through transition, I would have a 15-minute daily stand-up with the key team members just to make sure that people feel supported. At Leverage, we do weekly department meetings, weekly one-on-ones, and then we have longer form monthly meetings as well. And then I mentioned before that Slack has integrations One of the integrations is a bot called Stand-Uply, which is a bot to help you do daily stand-ups. So what this bot can do is you can program it to ask questions to individuals, a part of a team or a channel, and the bot will ask the questions, and then the responses that the team member gives, they get aggregated, and all responses go to one channel. So as a manager, it's great. You just have to go to one channel and you could see all the responses of the team members that you asked. And if you've never done something like this before, the most simple way to start is you just ask the questions: what did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? What are you stuck on? So I hope that's helpful. That's a really simple way of doing it. We run weekly meetings following loosely the EOS structure, which was developed by Gino Wickman. He's the author of Traction, and basically it's a 90-minute meeting. It has some structure at the beginning where you go over team member or client headlines. We go over scorecards and quarterly goal review. And then we get into the meat of it, which is identify, discuss, solve. And that part of it is the meat of the meeting. And we have a policy at the company where if you want to talk to someone or you have an idea or something that you need to address that's not urgent, don't distract me in Slack. Add it to the agenda for next week's meeting and we'll cover it there. 90% of the time, it works itself out and you just saved all that distraction time during the week. But it's a massive productivity gain to be able to batch cover ideas and concepts that your team members want to go over. So I really suggest a collaborative agenda. We started doing monthly strategy days, or it's a half day, and that's an opportunity to kind of solve harder problems that are really hard to solve on a 1 hour or 2 hour meeting. And then we have our own process of doing longer form discussions around quarterly planning. What we found, and really I'm sure Jeff is much more of an expert than me at this, but what we found is investing up front and being really specific and strategic with your quarterly planning. What are the key projects that we want to work on this quarter or on the monthlies? What are the key things for the month? It saves a lot of time intra-week when you invest the time up front being strategic. So about 80% of the projects for the quarter are locked in during our week of quarterly planning. It takes us a full week to do our quarterly planning, like a week of half days. But after that, there's clarity and alignment and focus by all key team members after that. And then for the rest of the quarter, if I had to take a month or 2 months off, I know that people know what to do. So again, every meeting has an agenda, and we have the policy: if it's not urgent, don't Slack me. We use Asana to manage our agendas, and you could see on the left, these are projects. I have a naming convention for the projects, so they all start with agenda, and then I have a project for each type of meeting, and I have one catch-all for my one-on-ones where each of my direct reports has a section. So that's a place for me as a manager to brain dump anything I want to cover with these people that is not urgent right now, but it's not appropriate for me to Slack them. So I'm just going to dump it there and I'll get to it next time I get on a call with them. If you don't have structure to your meetings, we always start with a 5-minute positive focus. What did you do over the weekend? It's a way to break the ice. And this is a little bit of common sense, but start off your meetings going over the most important things first that are absolutely needed to be discussed on that call. We found that having a moderator really makes the meetings more efficient. So if someone's going off on a tangent or spending way too much time talking about a particular topic, that moderator's job is to get the meeting back on track. They also load any action items that come out of the meeting. They load it into the project management software. But then also what we started finding is that we would make decisions on meetings, and those decisions would get forgotten because we weren't documenting it well. So I think it's important that any company policy change that needs to be documented after that meeting, you should update it in your company's knowledge base. That way you can always go back and reference, what did we talk about? What did we decide about on that meeting? So getting into the last part of CPR resources, I'd like you to imagine for a second the number one person in your company. Got it? So usually when I give these talks, I say, imagine that they tell you that they're leaving, but I think now more realistically, it's a high chance that they might get the coronavirus, right? So imagine that, and imagine they say, look, I'm sick, I can't work for the next 2 weeks. Are you set up for that right now? Right? Is their role well documented? Do you have backups? So that's what the whole point of resources. It's one, documenting knowledge will help to reduce time to find information, but equally, it de-risks your company from someone quitting or getting the coronavirus and being out for a couple weeks. So at Leverage, and what I suggest with my private clients is there's two types of knowledge to be capturing in any company. You have static knowledge, which answers the question who, what, when, where, why. Who's the CEO? When's the town hall? Where's the office? And then you have dynamic knowledge, which answers the question how. How do you onboard a new team member? How do you do payroll? Where it's a sequence of steps and you have to follow a certain order. So for the static stuff, those are knowledge bases. Here's a few. We use Notion at the company. We've also tested others, but it doesn't matter which one you use. You need to have a knowledge base. You need to be capturing and have a place where people could go and find company information. Okay, so Ask Spoke is a Slack bot. The benefit of this one is it ties into this Slack bot ties into a knowledge base, and using natural language processing, you can ask the bot a question. It'll look up in the knowledge base what the answer is and return the answer. So you could see here, you asked someone asked what's the vision of the company. The bot found that answer. The downside to this is you have to know what to ask the bot in the first place. So if you don't know what to ask, you're not finding any information. So we've found it much more successful to use Notion instead. And that's just a very, very simple to use knowledge base where you can really easily find and navigate through to find any information. If anyone in the company wants to know what are the quarterly objectives and key results, there's a page for that. They could go to that page and see exactly what is being worked on a company level. So all of this falls into digitizing your knowledge, right? And especially in a remote world, it's absolutely critical that you do that. So what I would suggest is, in general, I would suggest that you rotate positions quarterly. We've been doing that for the last 4 years at Leverage. So every quarter we'll pick 2 people to swap roles in order to stress test that their processes are well documented. And I took this concept from the days where I was a high frequency trader on Wall Street. And every year we used to have to take 2 weeks block leave to make sure that we weren't hiding trades. And even though I was the world expert at my algorithms, there was always some suggestion or improvement to how my book traded. And that's because fresh eyes spark innovation. So aside from de-risking, you're also going to find that you get improvements to how things are done. So you don't have the luxury right now of doing some of those exercises, but you should be thinking about what happens if someone gets sick and identifying key risks right now in your company and documenting and having people right now raise their hand to be backups and test ahead of time that they know how to do that process. And another benefit of all this stuff, aside from the de-risking and the breakthroughs, is it will save you time. Like if you start using some of these tools, for example, I like a tool called Process Street for documenting processes. This can help you save time because tools like this integrate with automation tools like Zapier, which I first told you about. So you could start automating various steps in a process. You might get to the welcome call step, and now you just have to click a button, and that automatically sends a new hire some email. It also makes sure that you don't skip steps. So if you ever read the book, The Checklist Manifesto, it's written by a surgeon who talks about by having checklists in surgical rooms, it reduced the error rate by over 80% of surgeries. So it takes 10 times longer to fix a problem than it would have just have done it right in the first place. So a byproduct of this is you're saving time by avoiding, 1 in every 10 times having a mistake that's going to set you back and take a lot longer to fix. So it's basically these checklists, and you can have different input variables that could be used throughout the checklist. You can have conditional logic. So if a developer, if the application's a designer versus a marketer, you can ask different questions and have different paths that they go through. We even have a process for a quarterly planning. So every quarter, we as a company run through a process, and we make sure that we're booking the right amount of calls, scheduling the right meetings, etc. So
how much more
do
you want to present before questions? Because there's a few questions piling up.
I got 3 more slides. So
okay.
2 more minutes. So I know that I went really, really quick, and I want to get to Q&A. I want to leave you with this, though. I just mentioned a handful of tools. The tools don't matter. It's understanding the concepts, understanding that the CPR framework is the foundation of tools that you need. And even if Asana goes bankrupt tomorrow, you use another project management tool or Slack. It's important that you understand when to use these tools and how to think about them. And also, it's important to set these tools up right. So when I worked with a large client with over 1,000 team members, there were so many distractions because they set up Slack wrong. I estimated that every message was taking 10 seconds for them to read, interfering with their productivity by a minute. It was happening way more than 60 times a day, but I was estimating an hour lost per day. So that's $50 a person lost per day. 1,000 people in the company is $50K a day. So it's $1 million a month. So I'm not trying to scare you, but it's absolutely critical. And I can't stress enough that it's not just knowing about one of these tools. You have to be setting these tools up right, or else it could hurt your productivity. So happy to get into Q&A. I've created a few resources for you guys that are all totally free. So if you want the answers to that quiz, you can go to atp.getleverage.com, and I have a few tools in there, including the answers to the quiz. I have a free Facebook group, Making Remote Work Actually Work, where I'm posting a ton of content. And then the website for Leverage and my personal email is there too, in case you want to reach out and I can be helpful at all. So with that, happy to get into Q&A.
So there are people who are having a pause in their business or slowdown or something like that, and I could see them using this opportunity to rebuild all their systems.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, let's do it right. What about the other people that are running, completely above capacity? Do you chip away at the problem? Do you leave it for a while? Do you have to eventually raise everything and rebuild it? How do you go from the way it was to the way it, quote, should be?
Well, you have to do it in steps, and you'll appreciate this concept because you come from a technical background, Jeff. But in software development, you have the concept of technical debt, right? Where every couple years, that you're gonna have to refactor your code base because things have changed, requirements have changed, and you kind of just know you have this technical debt that you will have to repay. Well, there's no different with operations. You all have operational debt. This right now, we use this to your benefit. Everyone has had to hit the pause button at the same time here. So it's a great opportunity to go back and fix the operational debt that you have in your company. And the way that I would suggest chipping away at this is start with your communication tools, because that is literally, like I said, the oxygen of the company and the lowest hanging fruit. And some of those, like Process Tree and Asana, those are equally, if not more important, but they're also more complicated. So I would start with the easiest stuff to set up, get to inbox 0, set up Slack or Teams, make sure your team's comfortable with Zoom. And then after that, I would move on to looking at how you do agendas. Then after that, I would look at project management software. And it's better to have fewer tools set up, but they're being used properly than to have 10 tools that aren't set up right. So I hope that answers your question.
That was a super helpful answer, I think, to give a step-by-step, this is the first, second, third. It seems like a lot. I heard from you as you went through this, 2 levels of thinking. Like, what are the principles? Understand the principles first, and then layer the tools on top of the principles. Is that a good way to describe this?
Yeah, because everyone likes to start with tools, right? I'm a bit of an academic, so I like to think in terms of theory and principles, but it's true. Everyone just wants the magic pill, right? They want, what's the one tool? And I just need to know the tool and then it's going to fix all my problems. But it's not the case. Like, if you don't know the principles of when to use the tool, how to think about the tool, it's just going to hurt your productivity or waste your time. So principles are by far the most important. Knowing when you should use a communication tool versus a project management tool, because the tools will change. Like, if you look at what tools or softwares were available 10 years ago, most of them aren't being used right now, or very few. So if you understand the principles, then it doesn't matter. We've switched tools a million times in Leverage, and it takes very minimal time for us to swap one tool out for another, because people already have the mindset and knowledge of when and how to think about the tools.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We have a question that came in. I don't know if it's grooving on what you're here to talk about, but the question is, what are the downsides of being solely remote? I know you've solely remote, so I don't know, but I'd love to hear your answer.
I think the downside is if you are not productive and not tech savvy, it's going to be painful. You could argue that it could be hard to maintain culture in a remote environment. So I think it's important to follow kind of those suggestions of showing the video, showing your face as much as possible, but you are missing that face-to-face interaction. So at Leverage, what we do is every 3 or 4 months, the core team gets together for a few days. So we do have a mix of in-person, because you can't replicate that over a Zoom. But I do believe that if you are set up right, the absolute best way to run a company is remote, and you have the ability to meet, at some amount of times per year in person, because I think that is something that is critical.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you have, or let's say we are hitting pause or even starting a new company, is there a productivity in a box kit that says these are 5 tools that work perfectly together, and start with them and grow off that?
I have some content that I've posted in that Facebook group, the Making Remote Work Actually Work, and then also the link I gave for atp.getleverage.com. I have our toolbox of all the tools that we use at Leverage, but I would suggest email. I prefer Gmail, but it doesn't matter. But so email, Slack, those 2, Zoom, a project management software, a knowledge base, so Notion. Those would be the first 5 that I started with, and then I would build off of that, and Zapier, the automation tool. But start with the communication tools, move to project management, and then the Notion you could do whenever. That's a pretty easy one to set up.
That sounds good.
But I mean, we're literally using probably hundreds of tools at Leverage, but I wouldn't get started with that. Start with those 5 or 6.
Okay, here's another question. As a manager, what do you do if your team does not get on board with the tools?
Fire them.
Very simple.
Yeah, I mean, like it's part of your culture. So if you want your culture to be that you want your teams to be efficient and be able to run remotely and efficiently, then if you are bought in that needs to be part of your culture, if you have a team member that no longer fits your culture, then they might not be the right team member.
Yeah, in scaling up, we have a concept of this called disagree and commit, which means we want people to be heard out, and then after they're heard out, we make a decision, and then whether it was a decision you wanted or not, you're on board with that decision.
Yep.
Okay. We have like a minute or two left. Can you just tell us what leverage does for people?
Yeah.
And how they engage
Sure.
with you?
Sure. So leverage is an on-demand growth agency. So we help people with marketing, sales, operations. So if you're not comfortable setting up some of these tools, we can help you set up some of these tools. If you need help building content, spinning up a landing page, a sales funnel, Facebook ads, content creation, blog creation, podcasts. I mean, I have a podcast, the Leverage Podcast. They do everything from the editing to the show notes to promoting it on social media. I'm a writer for Inc. I have a 3-minute idea I do in the back of a cab when I used to take cabs back in the day. And I would do 3 minutes in the back of the cab with some audio message that I would send to my ghostwriter. He would write the Inc. article, publish it on Inc., and then he would send it over to some other people that would promote it on social media. So those are the types of things that we do for clients where you get a high return on time. So anything that helps you in terms of outsourcing marketing, sales, operations, we're a replacement to a full-time hire, or you going on a scavenger hunt on Upwork or Fiverr. We give you a team of curated, trained people that you could use as much or as little as you want. And it's billed to the second, and it's month to month. So if you're going through some struggles right now and you still want some marketing or some presence as it relates to growth, but you don't want to commit to a full-time person, but you want that, senior quality level person, we might be a good fit for you. And the website's getleverage.com. And my email is nick@getleverage.com.
So your article writing story, for example, just like I don't want to work out, I want to have worked out. I feel the same way. I don't necessarily write the article, but I want to have written the article.
Well, half the time I don't even know that there's an article. Like I'm the first to know about an article the day that it gets published, because a lot of the times my writer will just take my podcast that I did and take the parts out of it and turn my podcast out of an Inc. article without me even knowing that he did it.
So I hope some of the people get some inspiration from that idea of getting a team or a system or a combination of a team and a system to get things done.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge benefit to having team, right? You have team think.
Yeah.
There's only so much knowledge one person has.
Okay, we're going to have a short break, and we're going to go into the same session. We'll see. We'll have a 2-minute break, and then after that, we'll have Will back, and then we'll have another speaker. See you all soon.